Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We're back with another Neurodiversity Stories, and I'm your host. My name is Darren Clark. So why are we putting neurodiversity stories together? It's to spread more awareness around neurodiversity, but we also want to make sure that we are sharing people's stories that are not necessarily people who are neurodiverse, but people who aren't neurodiverse and that also work with neurodiverse people. That's a little bit of a tongue twister for Friday, but guys, thank you so much to all of our previous guests that we've had. We've had a phenomenal amount of guests. I'm absolutely bowled over with the support and the people that are wanting to come onto this show and share their stories and share their kind of wisdom and kind of ideas around neurodiversity. So we're always looking for more guests. So if you would like to share your story or your expertise around neurodiversity, then please do get in touch. As always, we can't do this without the people that are watching and supporting as well. So please do let us know where you're tuning in from. Like I said, we share this neurodiversity stories out literally across the globe with people from Germany, Poland, Australia, America. And it's amazing for everyone to kind of the private messages that I get and the people that are connecting while the shows are going on as well. So please do, guys, let us know where you're tuning in from. So we have another incredible guest, good friend of mine, Stuart Marsden, who's going to be sharing an incredible topic, which I will touch on shortly. But I also want to say a massive thank you as well to our brand new sponsor, who is Claro Writing Helper, and they are sponsoring our Neurodiversity Stories at the moment. And please do check out this. So guys, the goal of Claro Writing Helper is to reduce the overwhelming and the stress when creating long, structured pieces of writing. The software does that by both teaching and the process of creating this in structured work, and also guides you through this process by helping you to focus only on the things that are important at each stage. That's only a fraction, guys. All the information on what they do and how amazing this piece of software is, all in the links below. And as the series goes on, we'll be sharing a lot more around Claro Writing Helper. So guys, today we have an amazing guest, good friend of mine, Stuart Marsden. He's an experienced project manager, professional and chartered engineer with a PhD in bioengineering. I'm absolutely thrilled to be speaking to Stuart today. The topic of talk today is, can the neurotypical design for the neurodiverse? So that's a question that we're going to be asking Stuart on this, and we're also going to be talking. So just to give you guys a little bit of a brief, so designers and engineers don't always make solutions to their own needs and have to develop skills to learn to understand what users require. Those making solutions for neurodiverse aren't always neurodiverse themselves, and even when they are, they have different needs and different views. We want to talk about the empathy and the sympathy and the experience and how these things can enable us to better deliver working solutions to neurodiverse users. So I'm absolutely thrilled to have Stuart with us, and I'm going to introduce you to Stuart. Good morning, Stuart.
Morning.
Just like that, you just appear.
Yeah.
Unsure of when you're going to be joining, when you're not, if there's going to be any more videos, any more noises.
You didn't want to catch me, or I was just wiping the crumbs off the corners of my mouth or anything like that.
So, Stuart, I've been connected with you for quite some time. I think we met on digitally, of course, on LinkedIn. Obviously, a massive fan of the stuff you're doing, the content that you put out, and the amazing work that you do, especially from a neurodiverse point of view, and how you help. And I know we'll touch on that shortly. But it'd be amazing if I hope the kind of the little bit of bio that I gave you justice. And if you could just tell the viewers just a little bit about you, that would be amazing.
Yeah, great. I'm it's probably worth starting by saying that I'd probably label myself as neurotypical.
Neurotypical, yes. Sorry,
you know,
absolutely, Stuart. Yeah,
it's a strange word. I'm not sure whether I even like it, but I have no diagnoses of anything that you would call neurodiversity, right? My wife laughs though when I say I'm a neurotypical. She's like, "No, you're not." And I think that's important to understand. I think all of us are neurodiverse in the sense that we all think differently, right?
absolutely.
So I've always been like an engineer type, a technical type, and I guess if I try to understand myself, like, and what I've done in my career, and it's always, I think the consistent thing that I've always done is tried to convert the needs of the customer or the user or the patient. When I was in the NHS,
yes,
tried to understand the user's need and convert that into a solution for them. And no matter whether we're talking neurodiversity or otherwise, you are not that user.
yes.
You have to get in their brain. So that's really me. I guess that's what I do, or try to do.
But it's so important, isn't it? Because I guess when we start off, designing something, we obviously, you can get to a stage where, you're very passionate about what you do, and you almost kind of own that thing, and you think, oh, actually, this will work. But you're absolutely right. It is kind of the end user, and you're always kind of thinking about how would this, best kind of work for that person. So, and by all means, obviously, we do get very protective on this, but some of the most fantastic things come from people just tweaking it and saying, well, actually, this kind of works. So that having that empathy from the start, Stuart, I can see it really works.
It's actually it's a skill to develop, I think, to a degree. There's a creative writing guy that I listen to a lot, and he says there's a phrase that he uses called "kill your darlings."
Okay.
So he writes a story and he introduces this character, and the main character is the big hero. He's got the big sword and he loves this character and he wants this character. And then suddenly he's like realizes, or his editor tells him, you've got to kill that character. You've got to kill him. You either cut him out of the book altogether, he's going to have a brutal, horrible ending right now. And you're like, but I love this character. He really works for me.
Yeah.
And the editor says, well, he doesn't work for the reader. It doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for others. And you've got to say, okay, actually, I've made this thing and it fits in my hand and it's comfortable for me and it's the way that I would use it. But then I gave it to my nan and asked her to use it, and she turned it upside down, shook it around, got no value from it whatsoever. So you've got to learn to kill those darlings,
Yeah.
You've really got to learn to do that.
So how did you get into software and designing? How did that kind of come about?
How long have you got?
3 days. No, I'm joking.
Cool. Right then, crack my knuckles. No, I went. Long story short, though, I'm a mechanical engineer originally, so I studied mechanical engineering, and there was a lot of opportunity there to do oil and gas. I'm a bit ethical when it comes to that sort of stuff, so I'm not interested. And then there's defense and aerospace industry, and I'm like, again, I'm a bit ethical there. I don't really want to make weapons and stuff. And then there's making machines run a little bit more efficiently in a production line and whittling down that 1%. Again, not for me. What do I do? And I loved medicine. I loved the body and, sport and how the human worked as a machine. So I got really heavily into orthopedics and assistive technology and medical devices, and my career's just taken me in that direction. So over 10 years ago, I was in the NHS building AT, assistive technology, for people with really extreme disabilities, physical disabilities, cognitive disabilities, combinations thereof, like motor neuron disease, very advanced stage, switches and communication aids, and and that was just, that really brought home this challenge that I talk about designing for people whose needs they can't communicate. Literally, I've made things for people who couldn't communicate. And how do you understand what their needs are?
How do you, Stuart, if you don't mind, that's truly incredible. What you were doing. How do you go through that stage? I mean, obviously there's certain things you probably can't share, but how do you even start with something like this? Because we look at when we're building something or a plan, we've got all the plans and stuff, and then we build it or we design it. But something with so much empathy and so much kind of trying to understand what the actual needs. Where do you even begin with? What does the process kind of look like?
Well, you would start by looking at what you've done for others, and what has worked before. But you need to be very careful not to fall into the trap of assuming that because it worked for that person, it's going to work for this one.
Yeah.
So you've got to, all your knowledge and experience would suggest a starting point. There's a story I'd like to tell actually that helps answer the question.
Please do.
And it's a
Lovely.
pretty sad one. So I apologize for this on a Friday morning, but it's what really probably motivates me the most. And I think about it a lot. It was a gentleman with MND, ALS, I think it's called it's also known as ALS. So he had advanced stages. It was in care, and it was losing function quite rapidly. And we were called out to give him a switch, and he could move his foot, but he couldn't really press. He could release his foot quite easily. So we had a switch where his foot would rest on that switch. The intention was, and he could call for help or do other things. He could maybe but it's a button. There's not so much you can do anyway. But he could call for help, and he could signal other things, like he could change TV stations or something. If he was listening to a book, he could skip a chapter or whatever he was doing. Yeah. He could lift his foot. So we went and we rushed and we tried to get this button right, and we had to make little jigs and understand the shape of his foot and how he sat and how he was. And we were really, really pushed to get this out there, and we put this thing together. We prototyped it in the lab. We got it working. It was all good. We rushed out a couple of days, a week or so. We went back and we issued him this switch, and he died in the time it took us to make it. That was an awful story, and that disease is, I don't want to be too sad. That's not what we're here for.
No.
The point I want to make with that story is that I never communicated with that man at all. Not once. He couldn't speak. So, it was impossible, I think, maybe impossible. And that was the hardest challenge I think I've ever faced in terms of delivering any solution to someone, not just because of the time pressures, but because it was maybe impossible to really understand what his needs were.
Yeah.
So that was early in my career. And since that day, this has been my motivation, And we're talking about dyslexia and ADHD, and that's nothing like MND in terms of the needs. You wouldn't ever call an MND a superpower. So it's very different, but at the same time, it's the same, because you are not the person you're making things for.
Yeah. No, well, thank you for sharing that story, Stuart. And that must have been, like I said, incredibly tough for everyone, all around. And you're working, to try and get this designed, and sadly, passed away. But the sheer empathy that went into kind of design, and I guess that's kind of held throughout your career now in that, the end user. And I guess, would you say, because you've got that kind of design engineering kind of, kind of mind and brain, that I almost see, because we say around kind of neurodiverse and neurodiversity and say dyslexia and ADHD and all these different things, that we kind of see the world different, that kind of thinking out of the box. But I would say, definitely, this is why I admire kind of designers and engineers, not just if they are neurodiverse or not, but that kind of, it's almost taking a design and then saying, right, okay, taking that completely apart and seeing all the different angles that could possibly do. And is that kind of how your brain works?
Yeah, I think the starting point is a prototype, which you probably do largely on your own. With input, you'll talk to people and you'll get other feedback, but that might not be you might not yet have spoken to users on your prototype. So you make this thing, but then you have to make it, and play with it to get a good idea. But there's nothing at all. There's no way to replace, sort of 10 minutes watching someone with dyslexia, for example, try to use a piece of composition writing software. You can pretend all you want to be a dyslexic person. You can pretend, I know dyslexics. I've worked with dyslexics. I understand what dyslexia is, even though I don't have it. I get this, this is what they need, right? Yeah, this is what they need. Give it to a dyslexic person for 5-10 minutes and watch them break it. It's, watch them break it. It's amazing. Some of your previous guests I've spoken with on this topic as well, dyslexic people, and it's amazing, and just to see how you just pick it up, turn it upside down, and use it in a completely unintended way and get great results a lot of the time.
But it is, isn't it? You do design this, say, this software or device or something, and it is, you are very precious, and then you say, well, actually, give it to the person that's going to be using it, and it's fascinating, isn't it? Like you said, the turning it upside down and shaking it and all these things, because it's just that different way that it's going to be used, and that feedback is so vital when you're kind of designing. So how did you then get into so you were obviously working at the NHS. Did you then stay at the NHS for quite some time?
I was in the NHS for 5 or 6 years, left about 5 or 6 years ago. So I've been out of the NHS almost as long as I was in it now, which is, I hadn't realised that. No, I moved for love. I met my wife where I was. We were in the northeast of England, in Middlesbrough. She was at the university there, and I was working at the university now. I was at the James Cook Hospital there, and we were both from the northwest, and we wanted to move closer to home for some family that was down here. So I'm now in the northwest, and the work I was doing was fairly specialised, and I'm not commuting to Newcastle or Middlesbrough every day, and there just wasn't that opportunity to stay in the NHS. Just wasn't available. So I went into medical device manufacturing then in Blackburn. So it was a forced change. I don't regret it. I loved the job, but I'd certainly made the right decision. I've got this now, so
Congratulations. So then you then kind of moved from, is it more kind of then tech then into the more kind of the design of the tech element?
Yeah, so the medical device stuff that I was doing after the NHS was manufacturing. I ran a design team, and we made lots of single-use disposable devices, tubes for suction in surgery and things like that, injection molded plastic components, things like that. Really interesting. And I learned a lot from sort of managing a design team and the sort of more commercial side of things, like the private sector approach to business was really interesting. I was there for a few years, but it wasn't assistive technology. It was too far from the user for me. The user in that case was probably the surgeon. Trying to understand the surgeon as the user, not the patient. And it didn't resonate really well for me. Great team, great business, great stuff happening. But I just saw an opportunity came up at Claro Software just over 2 years ago, spring or so, 2019. And I just saw a little advert, and I didn't think I'm going to apply for this. I just thought, I'm free on Friday afternoon. I'll just have a chat. We used to work half days Friday, so I just picked up the phone and said, can I speak to this, what's his name on the job advert there? I'm really curious to ask a question. And I was working there within a couple of months, I had to work notice, but, I was given a job offer not long after that, because I think this passion that I've always had about, that whole thing, what does a user need, and what the empathy that you need as a designer or engineer to. That's really.
And I think like you said, when you were working before, and the end kind of user was the surgeon. I guess now, in the sense that you can kind of interact with more closely with the people that are using the software that you're creating and designing, and obviously you can see you're more in touch, I guess, with the end user.
Yeah, there's a big my wife and I share this sort of similar passion about similar to this idea of delivering things to people who are have a disadvantage of some kind. We're talking about I would argue whether neurodiversity is a disadvantage. I think we're on the same page there. It doesn't have to be. I'm neurotypical again, but I had some disadvantages growing up. I wasn't from a rich family, and university was hard for me to get into. So that sort of, the social mobility side, the widening participation and the aspirations of younger people, particularly if you're a male with dyslexia, if you're BAME, if you're from certain areas of the country, you've just got so many barriers in between you and getting out there. So there's a lot that drives me to help people study as well. Not everyone I was the first in my family to go to university. There have been a few more since who perhaps looked at me and went, "Oh, I can do this."
It was alien to me growing up. The university just seemed like a completely different species. to me.
The transformation, though, that's almost accurate. The change that you go through as you do undergraduate study is quite remarkable for a lot of people. You do start to see the world differently, and it's not just the course of study that you do. You do pick up other things, and meet different types of people and learn more about inclusion and diversity and equality and all the people you meet. It was fascinating. It's great for most people to do, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And I just like to think that it's just a shame that I was so actually advantaged and I didn't know it, because I'm really good at maths and spelling isn't a problem. And if I get given an assignment and I can read it and understand it within 10 minutes, I don't have to actually spend hours understanding what the task is before I even start trying to solve it. I didn't appreciate that until recently,
So how do you, Stuart, thank you for sharing that. How do you then, because I guess, when we're, around, like I said, say you're designing, the software, for people with dyslexia, and like myself, that kind of understanding around kind of the patience element, I guess, not patience from you, but the patience from, say, someone who's designing something and then they hand it to someone, to try and kind of understand, kind of what is simple for one person, maybe, more difficult for the other. So I guess, with the software that you're designing, there's so many different elements, to it. It's not, like I said, it's not just a case of designing it and say, right, off you go. There's so much more, I'm sure, that you have to kind of take into consideration. And does that help then being more kind of in touch with the end user?
Yeah, you've got to stay, you've got to be focused on a number of things. So you could make a Swiss Army knife of software that doesn't solve any problem very well, like a jack of all trades. You really need to stay focused on the solution, on the problem that you're trying to solve. So the solutions that you deliver map neatly onto what the problem is, and the problem is known, and that's always should be fixed in your mind. The writing helper is, we're talking about writing helpers. I'm talking about writing helper quite a bit.
Yeah.
And, it's about helping overwhelmed people structure written work. That was always the focus. So if somebody comes and says, well, what about adding audio content, or what about adding exam techniques, or adding reading techniques, and like, well, no, because that's feature creep, is what an engineer would call it.
Okay.
But then you do get different users as well, with slightly different needs within that. So that's where you really need to be careful that you don't exclude people, and you just stay focused is the answer, really. Stay clear on what the problem is that you're trying to solve. At the very beginning, the problem can change as you try to understand what you're aiming to do. But early on, you need to really pin that down and not budge. This is the problem we're solving. Don't change it as you develop that solution.
And that must take some doing and some practice within this, because I if you take dyslexia, for instance, we know that statistically they say that not one single person's dyslexia is the same as the others, because it's on such a scale. My reading may be a little bit more difficult than someone else. Someone there's so many different scales, and this, obviously, we know with dyslexia it's not just reading, writing, it's behavior, and there's so many different attributes that comes with neurodiversity and, say, dyslexia. So I guess that element which you touched on, which was incredible, even said it can be quite tricky then if you're then technically trying to design something where there's a big scale, in the sense of what works for one might not work for the other, or it might just be a little bit different. Having to tweak and change that without going adding all of these different other features, that must take some doing.
Yeah, you can please some of the people some of the time. But not all of the people all of the time. That sort of needs to be borne in mind, really. You'll never shoes have to be different sizes.
Yes.
You can't.
Yeah, I get it.
What's really good, though, in the AT sector, the assistive technology community, and what the options that are out there, is that if you took I used this analogy before, so you might be familiar with it, but if you took 100 neurodiverse people and asked them all to solve a specific problem, you'd get 100 solutions. You'd get 100, they'd all have little toolboxes, and they'd all do it in a different way. Yeah. That is not a bad thing. It makes my job harder, because I couldn't say to you, this is the way you do this. because you're like, it's not the way I do this. And I could then say, oh, well, this is the way you could do this. And you're like, all right, but I want to do that as well. I like mind mapping and I like post-it notes, but I use different colored pens for this, or I use this weird, what appears to be a really weird and wacky system of using 17 different technologies together to achieve this end result. And that's the process. That's your process.
Yes.
So what I recognize is that you have a toolkit. And if the stuff I make is one of those tools in your toolkit and you have a purpose for that tool, I've done my job, you know.
Tick, done on that one. No. I completely get it. And like I said, it is very difficult because, you know, I work with a lot of different assistive tech and kind of, you know, I have kind of my own ways of working and routines. And, you know, when I speak to so many other people around this, everyone, like I said, does have a different kind of way of, you know, kind of working and, you know, and using assistive technology. And you're right. You say that story about people using all these different pieces of assistive technology to get one task done. You know, I have heard those stories, and people would use one at one certain stage, and then another stage, and then another stage, and another stage. You know, and if it works for them, that's, you know, that's fantastic. And it's, I guess, like you said, not one thing fits all, but it's. I think, you know, if we talk about kind of assistive technology, you know, I was diagnosed with dyslexia at 36, so ADHD and dyslexia at 36. I then, you know, up until that point, I didn't know about dyslexia or, you know, ADHD and neurodiversity. I didn't even know I had it. So, you know, I'm not too sure, you know, what assistive technology was around kind of, you know, back then, 44 now, so quite some time ago. So I guess in my mind, it's kind of the coping strategies that I've had up until the age of, say, 36 and now kind of 44. It's then, again, you know, trying to break those habits of what you're doing to kind of assist, to then kind of take on different assistive technology to, you know, to kind of help and assist. And sometimes it's those habits, isn't it? Because I know as soon as I use assistive technology, it helps me no end. I know when I do, work with different assistive technology, it helps me. But sometimes that breaking that habit can be, you know, a little tricky.
You've hit the nail on the head. Actually, a part of the problem. It sounds really easy. Like if your partner says to you, my wife says to me, go to the shop and get me some snacks. That's a task, right? And I need to then stop, think, understand what her needs are, probably by interview. Sorry, sit down. I've got a few questions for you. What snacks? How many snacks? What's my budget? You know, but it's like, I know her a bit, so I'm like, she wants salt and vinegar crisps. There's no question. So I'm going to put that on the list. She probably wants some Mawams. I'll put them on the list, and we'll see what happens. And I know what she doesn't like, but I think for you there, as a 36-year-old man, you've just been told that you have dyslexia. Was it also? Was it just a dyslexia diagnosis you got at that time?
So it was dyslexia and ADHD, but at that point I knew nothing about either. So I kind of just took off.
But they both came like buses at the same time. You both. Yeah. Oh right, that was a bit of a eye opener for you, I imagine.
It was, yeah.
It's so that's akin to understanding. So my wife then suddenly finding out that she has diabetes, for example. Let's hope that doesn't happen. And then she asks me that question the same day. It's a totally different scenario then. So you weren't even able yourself at that point to communicate what your needs were.
Yeah.
So if I was trying to help you, and people no doubt were around you, either your friends, family, or professionals trying to help you, and you're also trying to help yourself, none of those people really understood, not even yourself, what your needs were.
Yeah.
So it's not as simple as like sitting in front of a client who says, this is what I want, and then you go away and manage that project. Even if they're really crystal clear, you still have to talk to them afterwards to make sure, clarify points, ask questions. The needs might change. You know, it's never simple. Even
I completely agree. And I find this, you know, in organizations that we work with, you know, some incredible organizations are doing, you know, amazing things. But, you know, when I speak to people, it is that kind of, you know, when you get a diagnosis around dyslexia, or, and then you would go into your workplace. And I've said this a few times on the stories. You sit down and you tell HR or your boss, whoever it is, and they say, okay, what support do you need? And at that point, they could turn around and say, you have dyslexia. But it was my kind of having to kind of research and looking into, Googling all these different things and understanding. And then it's almost, if you have an employer that's not too sure at the moment around neurodiversity in their workplace, if someone asks you, what do you need? Like I said, it is an impossible question to answer.
It's what problem are you trying to solve is a better question to answer, but what solutions do you need is a different. I don't even know what I'm trying to solve. I've just been told I've got ADHD and dyslexia. I've been fine so far. It helps me understand myself a little bit better. It probably explains why I think the way I do, or some of those challenges that I've had and I've thought I'm no good at writing, or I'm no good at paying attention, or I've been told I'm naughty, or whatever it is. It's nice probably for you at least to get that validation. But I spoke with a user of Writing Helper. I spoke with her earlier in the week, and she's a postdoc student, and she's been using the product. She wrote a PhD thesis with it, and she was in a situation like that where she got asked her employer, "Look, I've got dyslexia. I need some help," and they said, "Go and buy some stuff to help you." Okay, where do you start?
Yeah. And I think that it is where do you start, and that there are so many different, and I guess it's, there are different, solutions. Everyone's got solutions in softwares, and it can feel, like a bit, like going down a bit of a rabbit hole, to start off with. For me, I think the journey of connecting with people and organizations really helped. I didn't, as soon as I got diagnosed at 36, I didn't just go, oh, that's it, I'm cured, or I know exactly everything's fine, and tick the box. And it was almost like that was kind of the start of something to kind of really understand this.
I imagine you didn't sit in the corner and sulk either, did you?
No,
you don't strike me as the type.
I almost kind of just, I guess I just didn't really understand it at the time. I kind of just went, oh, okay, what is this? But what it did do over the years, I guess, was and I don't know if anyone watching this, that they did the same. There's certain situations that I can kind of look back on at, when I didn't get that promotion, or I really crumbled under that interview, or something where I felt it was very difficult to complete the task that they were giving me. I felt completely burnt out. I was exhausted, and I look back, and the mind is beautiful and amazing that we don't realize where we're thinking, if it's actually happened or it's not. But it was those moments I look back on, and I used to kind of cringe a little. And I guess I've learned to forgive myself for some of the things that had happened, throughout that. But I guess it is a part of a journey, and I guess the more connections I made, the more research I did, more people I spoke to, like you guys as well, they really it does kind of help and start that journey. And I guess you must get so many people, Stuart, coming from at different stages, from people that's, I guess, say dyslexic and they've just found out, and then dyslexic for many years and they're just looking into to tech.
Yeah, you've got so many factors to consider. It's if you think about like a DSA needs assessment, or you think about a client interview where you're hoping to work with someone and you're trying to sit down and understand in each of those cases what their needs are. Their needs just don't only relate in the assessment sense to their specific learning differences or mental health conditions or whatever they have wrong, I say in inverted commas, with them. So you don't just sit down and say, oh, you have ADHD, so that means you need this. But no, I've got ADHD, but I'm going to study mathematics, and I'm moving away from home, and I've got co-occurring conditions. I might have anxiety. I've got, I'm stressed about this. I'm uncertain. I'm young. I don't know what the world's like. I've not got any money because I'm from a poor background. But there's all those things that make up you, and if I So there's a conflict that I would face when making software. That guy the story that I told you about, the sad story that I told you about, that was an individual, and it was his needs I was trying to understand, and there were barriers. Obviously, there were barriers to understanding what he needed. There were other similar clients who weren't as badly placed in their life. They could talk to me, and that was easier.
Yeah.
But when you're in a software publisher setting like I am now, I'm not just making a piece of software for Darren. I'm also making a piece of software for thousands of millions. That would be nice. Yeah. Hundreds of millions of users. But, billions. Let's carry on.
Trillions.
Yes, trillions. Everyone has at least 10 copies. But it's you can't make the Swiss Army knife. It's important that you don't make the one tool that solves the magic bullet, the panacea. There's no such thing. You do need to stay focused. If you over-focus, you exclude too many potential users, and you've not got a good thing, because the 10 people who use it, you change their life. Everyone else doesn't get it. But if you make something that's so flat and broad and nobody uses it, because it has no utility. So you've got to find that balance between making sure that you're helping the right people in the right way and being clear that what you're not trying to do. Be really clear about the problems that you're not trying to solve with any given solution that you come up with. And it's really tempting, and we see it all the time, for the Swiss Army knife manufacturer to just add another blade, add another tool, and before you know it, you can't hold the thing anymore.
Yeah.
And
that's an amazing analogy.
We need to be really careful with what we do at Claro. You see Claro Read has extras, but they're organized in a good way, so we're not overwhelming the user with extra features. But if you take Microsoft Word, for example, brilliant product, but when you open it, how many buttons are there now? 1,000 different features, functions, and things you can tweak. They're not, they're adding features, and it's not the same for us in the assistive technology sector. We want to just make sure that we stay and never lose focus on the exact problems we're trying to solve.
You hit the nail on the head there, Stuart, when you said about, for me, I love simple things, in the sense of, even with regards to technology, if it's something that I have to kind of, read a great big huge dossier on, charge this, load this, learn this, and all these different things. And then there's different options of changing everything around so that tweaks back, that I find really tough. I'll give you an example that I'm not too sure whether, so we broadcast this out on StreamYard. Other ones available, but we broadcast this out on StreamYard. But when I was preparing the show last night, the way that it's organized has changed. So for me, that threw me. And when I say changed, it just meant that instead of the boxes being that way, they're now this way. Okay, so they're down instead of right. So that took me probably, I was on to support. I was, I was emailing support. Can you change these boxes around? I mean, getting that message, they must have thought, who's this guy? But for me, that one thing where it was moved around that way and not this way really, really affected me, because then I started thinking, am I going to be able to push, the buttons to be able to do this? Is there going to be a problem with this? It almost sent kind of a bit of my ADHD mind, or my dyslexia mind, kind of into a bit of a spiral.
Yeah, almost like an auto fixation, a hyperfixation sort
Absolutely.
of. Yeah.
I was just consumed. I couldn't do anything. I was kind of just focusing on, these buttons, and I was thinking, well, how do you do this, and how do you get this? But I guess from someone else, when they look at this, they might go, well, actually, you just now it's that way, so you just click it this way. But for me, that consumed probably an hour and a half, probably a good couple of hours of my life.
I was speaking to some developers. I speak to developers every day, the software developers. I was speaking to two of them yesterday, and they're making a new product, which I won't mention yet because it's a bit too early, but it's another product that we're aiming at keeping simple. It's simplicity is the goal. And the right mouse button, you've got left mouse button right, and then you've got the wheel that you can click in. So you've got a couple of things you can do with your mouse. Yeah. And the right mouse button doesn't do anything at the moment. And they said, shall we just, since it's not doing anything, shall we just make it duplicate what the left mouse button does? Just for now. So
Yeah.
that the user can choose, and I'm like, no, don't do that. It sounds great. It almost sounds better. At least the button would then be doing something. But imagine what would happen in a few months' time when the right mouse button does do something and we need to stop it doing what it's doing now and change how it behaves. Just like you with the box that just changed its orientation.
Yeah.
We'd end up with users calling us and say, wait a minute, that's been green for 10 years and you've made it lime now. I can't cope with this. And
Yeah.
this is a tongue-in-cheek example, but it's real. What you went through last night was real, right?
Yeah, and this morning.
it was real to you, and Claro Reed has the problem of being the age it is. The technology's new. It's a new product. We're updating it all the time. But if we change it too much, people who've been using it for over a decade, near 15 or more years, we've got some people who've been using it all that time. They'd be like, whoa, you're killing my darling now. I've been using this for so long, and you've swapped these buttons around, and it's blowing my mind. Can I reset it back to the way it was, please?
That's exactly. I was. Yeah. I'm a bit of a. My partner always says this in the sense that because I'm a bit reluctant to change in some aspects. I always say if it's not broke, don't fix it. And sometimes it's crazy. Really, I even down to the fact that I wear the most. My partner hates this. I wear the most holiest kind of New Balance trainers, and I've got like loads of other new trainers, but I'm kind of like they're just comfy. They kind of just
said trainers then.
What's that?
I'm glad you said trainers then. Like I've been wearing the same underpants for 20 years.
No, but so I probably am a little bit kind of reluctant to kind of change for for certain things. But the way that my mind works, I guess, as soon as something changes, especially with tech, and I think, well, actually, surely I see it's kind of that's the solution. That's how it's worked. But it's crazy because I wasn't using StreamYard say a year ago, so when I first came onto the software, I would have learned how their system works. But in my head, I think, well, actually, that's how it should always work. But things evolve and things change. But
there's a few words like discoverability and familiarity that we use in design a lot. And the best design is invisible. So it's rubbish for a designer because if you design the perfect solution, nobody tells you because they didn't even realize they were using it. Do you know what I mean?
It's solution.
I mean, a knife and fork that act differently, you notice, and the second you notice, that's bad design. But you go to a restaurant, whatever they are, not been for a while, but remember those. You go to a restaurant, you order a meal, you eat, and then 10 minutes afterwards, we'll be in the car and I'll say to you, do you remember what the knife and fork looked like?
Yeah.
And unless they were badly designed, you won't.
Yeah. So
that's the challenge that with the StreamYard onboarding for you probably, there was a lot of that experience that you just got.
Yeah.
You can look at your screen now and you'll see some buttons on the screen. You know which ones are buttons because of the way they're designed. You know what different things icons mean, and we all are familiar because we've seen them before, or they're just obvious. So when you do make changes to existing products, you're sort of compromising that familiarity straight away. Yeah. So a user who has always pressed a button in the top left corner to achieve a task, you can never, ever move that button. Yeah. Or you should never, ever move it. And if you do, somehow, almost as if by magic, that user should just gravitate towards the new place without any pain whatsoever. And to get that right is a near impossibility. It's a real challenge that I love. I love
that's
that
really interesting. It's great to speak to an engineer, developer, and software developer, and and I guess it was kind of fate that the software had changed, so I can kind of get
Great, I'll send Steam the the check later. Yeah.
I'm just going to showcase. There's a few comments. Again, guys, thank you so much for commenting and viewing. We've got lots of comments on here. If I can't get to them all, then I will answer them in the chat. I just want to say, so Pete Jarrett said, Claro Writer Helper is a brilliant tool. I use it for all of my big writing in work. It helps me to get things finished, which has always been an issue for me. Thanks very much, Pete Jarrett. Hope you're well. Kelly Holbrook just said, wow, what a tough story, but an incredible motivation to want to help people in an assistive tech way. Truly wonderful and inspirational. And I guess that was the story that you touched on earlier. There, Stuart. Jack Boyle said, problem solving is a neurodiverse trait. We're all on the spectrum. Understanding the problem is key.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Jack. And Bob Ward said, I agree, Jack. I've built my 2 companies around that. Susie has said, it's a familiar story for many adults. The adult network talks a lot about it, as well as the helpline. I think that was a subject when we were talking around about building that network around dyslexia. And thank you so much for sharing that. And I just want to share the last one I've got from Ruth Fenton. So totally get not knowing what you need. For example, recruiters ask, what reasonable adjustments do you need in an interview? You might think extra time when actually they could have provided questions ahead of time. Interesting, very, very good point, which would be more of a help. Or I just started studying an MBA, but not been at uni for 20 years. There's probably much better tech available, but I don't know about it, nor could I get funding to get an assessment done. Thank you so much for sharing that, Ruth. It is an interesting question when the time element. I've spoken to a few teachers before around kind of exams, and the first kind of instincts is a case of the student then gets more time to complete the actual task. But sometimes I would find if I was put in that environment, more time could be detrimental, because it doesn't matter whether it's 5 minutes or 2 hours. Sometimes the task might not get completed without the proper help.
The workplace and the exam model don't align neatly, do they? You're very rarely at work being given 2 hours to write answers to 10 questions, as Ruth was saying, you'd know in advance. And there are cases where, wow, this has just come up, we've got a firefight, it's very important. And you don't do that as an island then. Yeah. So in those situations where you've got 2 hours to do something really urgent and it's really high pressure, the rest of your life can depend on an exam result, literally.
Yeah.
You've got people around you, you've got a team who have different strengths and skills, and you work together. It's not often in the real world where you're going to be where the exam replicates, or an essay even, where they replicate reality. They're trying to demonstrate something else. It's your problem solving, not your problem solving under pressure. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I
think for me, I guess I left school with no qualifications, and then kind of managed to kind of work up the corporate ladder to quite a very kind of senior level, all with undiagnosed dyslexia and neurodiversity. And I guess there were traits where I was found so many things difficult and a struggle, and then excelled in others. And a lot of people's asked in the past, how did you cope with getting to such a high level and this without kind of assistive technology and all these routines? And the biggest thing I found throughout my life, and the businesses or anything, is people and working with people to and kind of playing, like you said, playing off of their skills, and then bringing knowing what you can do and what you would need assistance on. That's been a real drive for me.
Some neurodiversities make that harder though as well. That empathy and understanding and social inclusion, and really understanding what other people's strengths, weaknesses, dislikes and likes, and so it is hard. I think we learn it as you mature, as you get older, and you do get the experience, and you've worked with different types of people. Confidence grows as well. You get to a point. I'm at a point anyway where I'm more confident talking to different types of people in different settings. I'm better at conflict resolution. I'm better at sort of the empathy side of things, and all of that comes into being a better, and I want to say engineer, but I asked a question on LinkedIn the other day, a poll, like you do, about who considers themselves to be a creative. And the vast majority of response like, yeah, I'm a writer. You're a creative because you're putting this on. You're creating this today. I'm a creative. I think most people in the chat would probably say, yeah, I create stuff. I've created companies. I create roles for people. I create.
Yeah.
We all make things, and it is very important to have that sort of confidence, I think, in, I guess, not being right all the time is okay, isn't it?
Yeah, and yeah, that's I'm kind of used to that. I know that that trait, but I do agree. It is a case of playing to your strengths, and you know, and managing. For me, managing my dyslexia has been, you know, it's not something that you would be able to. I always find it's a bit like Groundhog Day for me personally. So if I'm, you know, I can have a day where I'm kind of, you know, writing, I'm doing all these different things and it's coping really, really well. And then the next day wake up and then it's kind of, you know, not that it goes away, but it's those moments that used to, I remember when I was younger, really kind of frustrate me. You know, those elements of why can't I just get it? You know, why with my short-term memory, when I look at a word, know how it's spelled, write it, then, you know, a paragraph later not be able to spell it or not even know, you know, it's almost like it's just given and then taken away. It's and I guess that's why, you know, assistive technology can kind of really help ease some of the...
It does. I mean, we try, what we try not to do with assistive technology is make it look and feel like it's assistive technology as well, though. So there's that nuance around not excluding the neurotypical as well.
Yes,
it's about equality, and it's about the diversity that we all have. And I have no diagnoses of anything, but I said my wife would laugh, or she does laugh when I call myself neurotypical, because I have my ways and I don't like change. And I'm a savant with certain things and I'm completely useless at others. But that's the same with everybody.
Yeah.
And the fact that you forgot that word and you're saying, why can't I do this when everyone else can? The language needs to change a bit and say, oh, wow, that's weird, but I'm really good at that instead. So you sort of make up for it elsewhere. And, you know, we're all different. As a teacher would say, every single student in their class has different learning needs. So to put them all in the same box and expect them all to deliver the same results and measure them with the same ruler, it's backwards. It really doesn't make sense. A lot of things don't make sense.
I totally agree. I'm just going to share just quickly. So Tori, super interesting. Looking forward to trying this product. And then we had, I've just looked over Writer Helper. It seems so easy. I don't know why this has not been done before. I wish I had it for my undergrad, maybe when I do PhD in 15 years. So Stuart, why didn't you do it before?
I know. I get that. I've got a PhD myself, and I wrote my PhD with something like Writing Helper in mind, like the way I did it. So there's some inspiration there, I think. But yeah, I do get a few people saying, go back in time and make this available to me when I was 18, please.
Yeah. Stuart, we're coming to the end of our time. Like I said, I could talk to you all day, my friend. I really do appreciate you, you know, taking the time out to come onto the stories. If people, I will put the link, guys, to the Claro Writer Helper for if you do require any more information on this. But Stuart, if people want to get in contact with you, how do they do that?
Well, my email, stuart.marsden@clarosoftware.com, or find me on LinkedIn, or ask Darren. He can put you in contact with me. Go to the clarosoftware.com website as well. If you want to look at Writing Helper, you can get a 2-week free trial just by clicking download. You don't need a license for 2 weeks. So have a play. Watch our YouTube playlist. There's loads of content.
There is.
If you are really interested in learning more about it, just get in touch with me.
Fantastic. Yeah. Stuart, thank you so much indeed for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. Have an amazing rest of the Friday and an awesome weekend. And I will catch up.
The heavens literally just opened. So.
Oh. Well, maybe have a cup of coffee and then tackle it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, my friend. And I'll speak to you soon.
Darren.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Guys, that was Stuart. I hope you enjoyed that just as much as I did. Guys, we will be back next Friday with another Neurodiversities. Have an amazing weekend, and I will see you soon. Thank you so much. Take care, guys. Cheers. Bye-bye.